Football immortalizes its heroes in trophies and headlines. But what about the warriors who left their souls on the pitch? Those who ran until their legs gave out, who played every game like it was their last? Alan Ball wasn't the biggest, the strongest, or the flashiest. But he was the fire that never burned out. A kid too small to be noticed, too relentless to be ignored. The tireless engine of England's greatest triumph. The man who ran, fought, and sacrificed, but never got the recognition he truly deserved. How did a boy once dismissed for his size become the heartbeat of England's 1966 World Cup victory? And why, despite his legacy, does his name not always echo among the greats? This is the story of a man who never stopped running, even when football was ready to move on. Some legends fade, others deserve to be remembered. Subscribe now for more untold football stories. Alan Ball's story didn't begin in grand stadiums under the floodlights. It started in the modest streets of Lancashire, where football was more than a game. It was a family tradition. His father, Alan Ball Sr., wasn't just a coach, but a relentless mentor, drilling his son with an intensity that forged an unshakable obsession. Unlike other kids who played for fun, Ball played to dominate. He absorbed every lesson, every tactical nuance, and every ounce of grit that his father instilled in him. Yet, when the big clubs scouted for young talents, Ball was ignored. Too small, too frail. Football's gatekeepers dismissed him before he even had a chance. But rejection didn't weaken him, it fueled him. He didn't just want to prove people wrong, he wanted to redefine what determination looked like. At Blackpool, he finally found his stage. He wasn't the tallest or the strongest, but his intensity, technical sharpness, and relentless stamina made him impossible to ignore. He played like every match was his last, covering ground like a man possessed. It wasn't long before managers and pundits began to notice something extraordinary. This so-called undersized player was outworking, outthinking, and outplaying the giants of the game. What happened next wasn't just a rise, it was an explosion. The world would soon witness one of England's greatest warriors, a midfielder whose heart beat to the rhythm of pure footballing passion. And in 1966, the stage was set for a moment that would define him forever. The 1966 World Cup final at Wembley wasn't just a game, it was a battle that would etch names into history. And among the legends that day, one man ran harder, fought fiercer, and burned brighter than the rest: Alan Ball. While others felt the pressure of 90,000 roaring fans, Ball thrived in the chaos. He wasn't the biggest name on the pitch, but he played as if the trophy was his destiny. Every sprint, every tackle, every pass carried the weight of a lifetime spent proving doubters wrong. Then came extra time. With exhaustion settling in, legs heavy and minds fading, Ball looked as if he had just begun. While his teammates gasped for air, he tore down the right flank with relentless energy, delivering the crucial cross that led to Geoff Hurst's famous second goal. His work rate was superhuman. He never stopped, never slowed, never wavered. When the final whistle blew, England were world champions. Bobby Moore lifted the trophy, Geoff Hurst got the hat-trick, but those who truly understood the game knew. Alan Ball had been the engine, the fire, the relentless warrior who refused to break. That night, Ball was the youngest player to win a World Cup for England, but his story wasn't just about triumph. It was about an undying, unbreakable spirit. The victory made him a national hero, but for Ball, this wasn't the peak. It was just another step in a career built on passion, defiance, and an obsession with the game. What came next? A move that would shape the next era of his life, one that involved a club draped in blue, ready to welcome a champion. A World Cup winner at 21, but Alan Ball wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to be remembered for one summer in '66, he wanted to dominate club football. And when Everton came knocking with a British record fee, Ball found his next battlefield. In 1966, he arrived at Goodison Park, stepping into a team with ambition but lacking a true spark. That changed the moment he pulled on the royal blue. Ball didn't just play for Everton, he embodied everything the club stood for: passion, fight, and a hunger to win. His impact was immediate. Fans saw a player who gave everything, sprinting for every ball, tackling with fury, orchestrating attacks like a general on the field. He wasn't just talented, he was relentless. And alongside Colin Harvey and Howard Kendall, he became part of a legendary trio that would define an era. The Holy Trinity, three men who didn't just play football, they dictated it. Their chemistry was seamless, their understanding telepathic. Ball's vision, energy, and leadership turned Everton into a force. But football isn't just about brilliance, it's about winning. That moment came in 1970. Everton, led by Ball's tireless brilliance, stormed to the First Division title, playing a brand of football that was both ruthless and beautiful. It wasn't just a triumph, it was proof that Ball was more than a World Cup hero. He was a leader, a champion, a player who elevated everyone around him. But just as Everton reached their peak, change was coming. Football is cruel, and loyalty is often tested. A decision was looming, one that would shake Goodison Park and define the next chapter of Ball's career. Champions of England. The Holy Trinity in their prime. Everton were poised for an era of dominance. But football doesn't wait, and success can be dismantled in an instant. In December 1971, Everton made an unthinkable decision. They sold Alan Ball to Arsenal for a British record fee of £220,000. Fans were stunned. How do you sell the heart of your team? The player who defined your midfield, the man who had just led you to a title. It wasn't just a transfer, it felt like a betrayal. Ball himself was blindsided. He never asked to leave. He had built a home at Everton, forging a bond with the club and its supporters. But in football, sentimentality rarely wins over business. The club saw an opportunity, and before Ball could even process it, he was on his way to London. The fallout was immediate. Goodison Park, once filled with dreams of a dynasty, was now clouded by disbelief. Fans protested, teammates were shaken, and the Holy Trinity was shattered. Everton, just 18 months after lifting the league trophy, had ripped out its own beating heart. For Ball, Arsenal was a fresh challenge. But could he ever truly replace what he lost? Would he ever find a team that fit him as perfectly as Everton? His career was far from over, but a piece of him had been left behind at Goodison. Yet, for all the heartbreak, Alan Ball was never one to dwell on the past. His fire still burned and his next chapter awaited. But would it bring the same glory, or was his greatest triumph already behind him? A British record transfer, a fresh start. But was it truly the right move? Alan Ball arrived at Arsenal in 1971 with massive expectations. The club had just won the league and FA Cup double, and they saw Ball as the missing piece to sustain their dominance. But football doesn't always follow the script. Ball was still the same relentless, passionate midfielder. His vision, his energy, none of it had faded. But Arsenal was different. The chemistry he had at Everton was irreplaceable. Here, he wasn't part of a holy trinity. He was a marquee signing in a squad undergoing transition. And soon, it became clear, the magic he had at Goodison wouldn't be so easily replicated. Injuries struck early, disrupting his rhythm. Arsenal, instead of pushing forward, struggled to maintain their status as England's best. Within 2 seasons, the team that had been champions was now faltering. Ball still delivered moments of brilliance, but the team around him wasn't built to sustain success. By 1974, Arsenal had dropped to mid-table. The dream move wasn't unfolding as planned. Ball's commitment never wavered. He fought for every ball, drove his team forward, and led by example. But deep down, he must have wondered, had Everton made a mistake selling him? Or had he made a mistake leaving? Despite everything, Ball remained a warrior. He wasn't finished, but with Arsenal declining and his peak years passing, the question loomed, what was next for Alan Ball? From a British record transfer to a move that few saw coming. In 1976, Alan Ball left Arsenal for Southampton, a club that, at the time, wasn't competing for titles or making headlines with marquee signings. But Ball's decision wasn't about glamour, it was about football. At 31, many believed his best years were behind him. Arsenal had moved on, and bigger clubs weren't knocking on the door. But Southampton offered him something invaluable: freedom. They needed a leader, a playmaker, someone to lift them beyond their mid-table status. Ball was more than ready to embrace the challenge. The impact was immediate. Unlike his time at Arsenal, where the system never fully complemented his style, Southampton built around him. He controlled the midfield, dictating the tempo, making everything flow through him. His leadership turned a decent side into a competitive one. And despite being past his supposed prime, Ball was playing some of the best football of his career. His performances didn't go unnoticed. England came calling again. At an age when most players faded from the international scene, Ball forced his way back in. It was a testament to his relentless drive, a reminder that class is permanent. For Southampton, he wasn't just a player, he was a standard bearer. But even as he thrived, football was changing. His story wasn't over yet. Another challenge loomed, and it would test everything he had left to give. By the early 1980s, Alan Ball had nothing left to prove on the pitch. He had played for England's biggest clubs, won the World Cup, and defied expectations at every turn. But Ball was never the type to walk away easily. He played on into his late 30s, extending his career at clubs like Vancouver Whitecaps, Southampton, and Bristol Rovers. Even in his final playing days, his influence was undeniable. His voice was just as sharp as his passing, his leadership just as commanding. But time spares no one. His legs couldn't keep up with the demands of the game anymore. The moment every footballer dreads had arrived. Yet, for Ball, stepping away from the pitch wasn't an end. It was the beginning of something new. Management was calling. His first opportunity came at Blackpool, where he had started his career as a teenager. It was poetic in a way, returning to the club that had launched him. But this was a different challenge. Managing required more than just skill. It demanded patience, strategy, and control. Traits that didn't always align with Ball's fiery personality. Yet, football had always been his life. He approached management with the same intensity he had as a player, demanding the best, pushing limits, refusing to accept mediocrity. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but Ball was never one to back down. The man who had once outworked and outplayed his critics now had to outthink them. But could he replicate his success as a player in the dugout? That was the real test. And, as he soon found out, football management was an entirely different battlefield. Alan Ball's transition from player to manager was never going to be conventional. He wasn't the type to sit quietly in the dugout, scribbling notes and watching from a distance. His passion for the game was raw, his voice ever present, his energy as relentless as it had been on the pitch. But managing was an entirely different battle, one that demanded not just passion, but control. His first step into management at Blackpool in 1980 was sentimental, returning to the club that had launched his career. But sentiment alone doesn't win football matches. Blackpool was struggling, and Ball, despite his enthusiasm, found the realities of management far more complex than he had anticipated. Balancing tactics, man management, and club politics was a challenge unlike any he had faced as a player. His time at Blackpool ended after just a season, but it was only the beginning. His next stop was Portsmouth, and this was where he started to leave a real mark as a manager. Ball guided the club to the First Division in 1987, injecting his team with the same fearless mentality he had embodied as a player. Portsmouth played with energy, pressing high, attacking relentlessly. But football can be cruel. Just a season after promotion, they were relegated, and Ball was let go. It was a harsh lesson in the unforgiving nature of management. Yet, he never stopped believing. Spells at Stoke City, Exeter City, and Southampton followed, with varying degrees of success. At Southampton, he had the chance to manage one of England's brightest young stars, Matt Le Tissier. Ball's influence allowed Le Tissier to thrive, giving him the freedom to express himself on the pitch. In 1995, Ball took charge at Manchester City, but once again, the club's struggles proved too much. Despite his efforts, City were relegated, and Ball's tenure ended in disappointment. His managerial career mirrored his playing days in one crucial way: he never backed down. Success and failure walked hand in hand, but Ball remained the same passionate, committed figure he had always been. The difference now? As a manager, he couldn't control the game the way he once did on the pitch. But through every triumph and setback, Ball's love for football never wavered. He lived and breathed the sport, giving everything until the very end. Alan Ball wasn't just a footballer, a World Cup winner, or a manager. He was a man who embodied the spirit of the game. His story wasn't about endless glory or smooth success. It was about persistence, passion, and an undying love for football. Even after his managerial days ended, he remained deeply connected to the sport, often working as a pundit, sharing his insights, and staying close to the game that had defined his life. But life after football wasn't always easy. The transition from the pitch to the everyday world is rarely smooth for footballers of his generation. For Ball, whose entire identity was wrapped in the game, it was even tougher. Personal tragedies hit hard. He lost his wife to cancer in 2003, and his struggles with life after football became more evident. Yet, in true Alan Ball fashion, he carried on, always keeping his passion for the sport alive. On April 25, 2007, football lost one of its greatest characters. Ball suffered a heart attack while trying to put out a fire at his home. Even in his final moments, he was fighting, acting, never one to stand still. His passing was a shock, a reminder of how fragile even the strongest spirits can be. But his legacy, that remains untouchable. The youngest member of England's greatest team, a man whose voice, energy, and relentless drive became his trademarks. Fans remember him not just for his performances, but for the passion he brought every single time he stepped onto the pitch, whether as a player, a manager, or just as Alan Ball. His influence stretched beyond the clubs he played for. Young footballers, even those who never saw him play, heard the stories. They watched the grainy footage of Wembley '66, the fiery red hair darting across the pitch, a man who never stopped running. They heard about the man who lived for football and left everything on the pitch every single time. His former teammates, coaches, and players who worked under him all said the same thing. Alan Ball didn't just play football, he was football. For fans, his name is still spoken with respect, his impact woven into England's footballing history. And perhaps that is the greatest tribute of all. Football has changed, but Alan Ball's legacy never will. Alan Ball's story is one of passion, struggle, and an unbreakable bond with football. From the streets of Lancashire to the grandest stage of them all, his journey wasn't just about trophies. It was about character, fight, and love for the game. Legends aren't just remembered for what they achieve, but for how they inspire others. Alan Ball's fire, his spirit, his relentless energy, it still lives on in the heart of every player who gives everything for the badge, in every fan who believes in the beautiful game. What are your memories of Alan Ball? What do you think his greatest legacy is? Let's keep his story alive in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to see more stories about football's greatest icons, make sure to subscribe. More legendary stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them.